very welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I know this is your day off, so
Yeah.
thank you very much for coming.
Great to be here.
Yeah. How was the gig last night?
Wonderful.
Yeah. First of all, did I pronounce your name right?
I don't know, everybody does it a little different, but it'll work.
So free. Your new album is called Anomaly.
Right.
Why did you call it Anomaly?
Well, you know, I was kicking around a couple of different names, and my assistant was going, you know, we'd be better off with a one-word name. So we were surfing the internet, and all of a sudden it just popped into my head, and he goes, "That's it." And then he said to me, "You know, Ace, you're probably like a walking anomaly, you know? If you look up the definition of anomaly, you know, it's something that, you know, out of the ordinary."
Yeah. Ace, I'm fascinated. You are a guitar legend, but you have never taken a guitar lesson in your whole life.
That's true.
How did you learn to play?
Well, you know, I grew up in a family with, I was the youngest of 3 kids, and everybody played the piano or the guitar or both.
Yeah.
So I kind of just got it by osmosis, you know, just being there. You know, my brother and sister took piano lessons, and were playing folk guitar. You know, they were a few years older than me, and when I was about 12, I picked up the folk guitar, and then I went to my friend's house who had just gotten an electric guitar, and I hit a power chord, and it was love at first sight, and, you know, it's been a love affair with me and the guitar ever since.
Cool, cool. Last week, we had a guy called Dregen on the show. Do you know who he is?
Who?
He used to play in a band called the Helicopters, and they opened for you when you were in Sweden in '97.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
I was drunk back then, you
Okay.
know? I was drunk for about 5 years in that period.
Okay, but he remembers you,
Okay.
and he's a huge fan, and he got to ask you a question.
Is he here tonight?
Now, let's take a look.
Hi, Ace. I was just wondering, for every album and every tour, you always change stage clothes or costumes. And I was wondering, which costume did you like the best of throughout the years in Kiss?
Actually, my favorite one was the Dynasty one, I believe. You know, the one with the...
Yeah. But what did people say about your costumes and the makeup in the beginning? What did people say?
Well, you know, we started out in New York, and at the time, you know, the New York Dolls were happening. You know, they wore a lot of feminine makeup. Alice Cooper, you know, was playing arenas. And, you know, I remember me and Paul Stanley going to see Alice Cooper, you know, and he had some makeup on, and, you know, he was doing the whole theatrical thing. And we just decided to take it a step further. And it was a lot of fun, you know. We, you know, every tour we developed a slightly different stage show, and, you know, changed the costumes a little, and yeah, but after a while, you know, it got to be a pain in the ass because I always had to like show up in the makeup, you know. And sometimes you wake up with a hangover from the night before. You got to go to a radio station, you know, and you got to wear makeup and the whole costume. I'm going, you know, I don't feel like doing this. So, you know.
The guy Dregen, he has a tattoo of you on his arm, and he said you're the reason he started playing in the first place. How does it feel to have that kind of influence?
I get that a lot, you know. It's, you know, when I think about it a lot, you know, I say to myself, maybe I should have practiced more when I was younger. You know, I didn't realize it was going to influence, you know, generations of guitar players. But, you know.
So I was just wondering, what's the biggest crowd you ever played for?
Biggest crowd? It might have been down in South America. I think we played for like 150,000 people.
150,000 people.
It was in Argentina.
Do you get the same adrenaline rush when you're playing a club or playing like an arena?
You know, it's different. You know, when you're playing in a big arena or a festival, you usually have that pit with bodyguards and security, so you never get a chance to really touch the kids. So it's a different kind of give and take. But, you know, on this tour, I've been playing like 1,000-seat places, 1,500-seat places. And, you know, during the show, I can reach over and touch hands and, you know, look at the faces of the fans. So, you know, it's more intimate. You know, you don't make as much money because you're not selling as many tickets, but it's just as much fun, just in a different way. It's a more intimate setting.
Cool. Many bands, fight really hard to make it. What did you think made Kiss make it so big?
Well, I think it was the combination of that. We had good songs, we had an interesting look and a persona, and we were larger than life.
Yeah.
So most of the fans always had a favorite, just like the Beatles. So I was the spaceman. You have Gene's the monster, and on and on.
Do you have any contact with those guys today?
Sure. Yeah. I talk to the guys every so often.
Yeah. I was reading inside your album cover, and you wrote that thanks to Paul, Gene, and Peter for putting up with my insanity throughout the years. Could you?
Wow.
What do you mean by insanity?
Well, I was a pretty crazy guy, and, early on, a lot of partying and stuff, Knock on wood, I'm still here, right?
Yeah, of course.
Where is it? I don't see
the floor. The floor.
But I'm just happy to be alive today, and able to perform, and this new album is the first album I produced myself, and pretty much wrote almost every song.
Will you ever play with Kiss again?
Oh, I don't know. Who knows? Never say never.
Never say never.
But it's not something I lay in bed awake at night, going, oh man, I want to play with those guys again. It's a lot. It's a joy being your own boss and not having to deal with 3 other egos. And Gene has a real big ego, so. But things are good.
Yeah.
Things are good. It's nice being in control of your own destiny.
Great. I always want to know more about my